All right. All right. We are live. Welcome to KabNET Live. I'm Joseph. And this podcast is for everyone, for everybody, for anyone who feels like it's about time to put the pieces into the big picture and zoom out of wherever we are and whatever it is that's happening in the world or even in our personal lives, and take the long view, take the big picture, understand where it is that we're going as individuals, as a society, as a species on this planet. Um, Human evolution and evolution in general is an interesting thing. It's not so smooth. It's a bumpy process. It's it's full of ups and downs. It's full of surprises. Many times, what we may see as a crisis actually ends up being something that is productive, effective, creative in some way. Nature has very peculiar and yet harmonious ways of guiding us and moving us and developing us. And what we want to do here is we want to try to take some cues from nature. We want to understand whether it's possible to somehow see how it's all connected, to somehow feel how we're all connected and how we're connected to each other and to nature itself. And we want to do that. So very soon we're gonna have I'm gonna have my dear friend, who is also a longtime Kabbalah student, psychologist, Tal Mendelbaum. She's gonna come on, and we're gonna talk about an interesting phenomenon that has presented itself, and that is that sexual activity among human beings, and especially younger people, is on the decline. And this is quite an interesting situation. We're gonna see why exactly is it's happening, and try to delve into the issue, but also zoom out at the same time to understand what it might be telling us. And so we're gonna have Tal in just a few seconds joining us, and we're gonna start diving into the topic. So right after this, we'll have Tal with us. All right, Tal, are you with us? Can you hear
Hello.
us?
Yes,
Hello.
I'm right here. Hi.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that was a
O-
beautiful opening that you gave there.
All right. Great, great. I'll also mention, that's a good time to mention that anyone who's listening, hearing, watching, you're very, very welcome to send us questions, thoughts, uh, comments, suggestions. Interact with us. Be with us in this discussion. Help us dive in and understand what's going on. So I do see some friends here, some listeners on the chat saying some good mornings and good afternoons. I guess it depends on where they are in the world. So that's
Uh-huh.
nice. Hi there.
Right. Hello.
And yeah, so definitely help us expand the conversation. Okay, so Tal, we both looked into this. I'm gonna actually share on the screen here an article from the Atlantic where they're basically dedicating December 2018 issue to this. Why are young people having so little sex? Despite the easing of taboos and the rise of hookup apps, Americans are in the midst of a sex recession. And it's important to mention that it's not just Americans. It's actually a phenomenon that is now taking place globally, mostly in Western countries. I've seen that some of the data talks about Finland, all the way from Finland to many different places in Europe and North America. What's going on? What's happening there? What is this phenomenon?
Well, I think what's interesting is, we think about a sex recession as something, it's kind of interesting to look at, but behind it, it's just a symptom behind which are very interesting and important aspects that are changing in our lives. And these very long, I should say, articles are really trying to look at all of these different possible reasons through the lenses of the changes that have been happening in our societies, and they're coming up with a lot of reasons.
It is
and
long.
I think
it's quite long. It's I think like something like 12,000 maybe words. Yeah.
Yeah, and you think, oh, what can people say about a sex recession? But really, sex is such a basic thing to life. It's such an important aspect of our life. It's the place where life begins. It's what connects people and fundamentally. And so if something's going wrong with that, then it really demands a very close look at a lot of other things that are happening around it and are causing it. And I think one of the most interesting and important things that are happening and we should be talking about is what's happening to our social skills. Mostly young people, but not only, are losing their social skills because of technology and social media and so forth.
Right. Let's maybe add some. I want to add some background on what at least all that research is coming up with for those who are not familiar with the topic at all. So this is something that many sociologists and psychologists like yourself and anthropologists are looking into, because there's a dissonance that needs to be explained. Basically, our culture has never been more open to sex among young adults before marriage, various forms of sex. What used to be considered a perversion today it's called kinky. Sexting has become a normal behavior for human beings. There's the morning after pill that anyone can quite easily get access to. There's apps that are quite normally used as apps for finding casual sex, and yet with all that, the younger generation is having less, not more, sexual activity. And so what's going on here? That's basically what the article is trying to answer. So just to bring our audience into the loop here.
Yeah, thanks. Right. So it's really interesting that despite all of this availability, we're seeing people who are less and less interested in that and less maybe able to engage with the other sex. And one of the biggest reasons that is coming up in the research is that we're seeing a loss of social skills. I think I sent you a link to an article from UCLA about a research that saw that sixth graders who went 5 days without glancing at their smartphones or screens at all were better at seeing emotions and reading human emotions than those kids in the other group that were still connecting through media and technology to other people. So it's quite obvious, there it is, that in our digital world, young people are losing some of their abilities to read emotions, to connect, to approach others without social media or texting or using technology. So this really puts a big hamper on people's ability to connect and find romantic relationships and any relationship at all with other people. And I think this is a very big thing that we should be looking into.
Right. I think there's something very interesting here, because while we are creating a situation where it's to be direct and blunt here, it's easier for people to get straight to the point in terms of sexual activity with these apps and human culture that has basically made it easier in various ways. We're actually not having more sexual activity. There is less. So is this like a is this like an opposite kind of an opposite mechanism that is working here? What's happening? And
Well,
yeah.
I think it's important to note that not everybody that goes on apps actually, goes on a date or makes contact. A lot of people spend a lot of time on these apps, but doesn't actually initiate anything or is able to come up with the courage to go out and actually meet the person they had texted with. A lot of these efforts to make contact end up with just spending a lot of time on the internet and nothing more. I think that's part of it, because we're losing the techniques, the skills that we used to have in making these emotional contacts with other people. And I think that also a lot of people are not satisfied with this hooking up culture, and we'll probably talk about that later.
So basically, on the surface, we have data that shows that people are less sexually active, but beneath the surface, there's a deeper thing that's going on here. We're actually losing the proper way to build relationships. We're not just in the actual attempt to make sexual activity more readily available and easy to achieve and so forth. There's a loss of the courting situation that is supposed to be happening as well. I mean, if you look at just nature, if you look at animals, you can think of like how the male and female peacock and how that works. You have a parrot right behind you. I'm sure
Yes.
there are some interesting courtship rituals that happen there maybe as well, between birds of all kinds. Now, we eventually are on that level, on our bodily level. That's a part of us as well. And so we're losing, not just, the decline is not just in sexual activity, we're actually losing some sort of a fuel for human life here, some sort of a major drive for life, because a lot of the things we do, and tell me how you see this from a psychological perspective. I mean, a lot of the things we do, at least between the sexes, let's say if we talk about males and females, a lot of the things we do are motivated and driven by our need to get attention from the opposite sex. I mean, this is something that develops in us as children much before the desire for sex, before we have a sexual urge. I'm just looking at my children, my kids. Definitely, at a very, very young age, I don't know, as little as 1-year-olds, something like that, they have a strong need for attention, and that need for attention grows, and it develops in us, evolutionarily speaking, even before the urge for sex. And then on top of that, we build a certain sexual attraction to the opposite sex. And so, men naturally have this alpha male survival instinct type of need to impress women. Women are usually, they're trying to get direct attention from men. So how do you see that process, psychologically?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that we need a lot more than the culture that has been created over the past years, and both males and females feel this way. I've read a lot about women who feel, and this is true especially for women, because they're such emotional creatures who need trust and communication and emotional security in a relationship. And even to enjoy sexual activity, they need to feel this kind of care between partners. And so I've read about a lot of women who simply are not happy and not fulfilled with the hookup culture, with with the casual sex culture that in many places has become the norm. I can send you a link about this article that I've seen, if you like, and we can look at that. It's a story. It's a story of someone who was on college campus, and she's telling about how it was such a strong norm that people would not have serious relationships. They had, hookups, and they weren't feeling secure enough to call it serious, to call it something formal. And the women were kind of expected to go along with that, even though they feel like it was making them happy. So here, this article specifically is talking about post-hookup hangover for women, because it's a known fact that during sex, a woman secretes these hormones that create a feeling of attachment to a man. So even if a woman is very secure in her sexuality and feeling very empowered and liberated and so on, she will still, biologically speaking, it will still be more difficult for her to handle the lack of emotional connection and the lack of commitment and continuity with the man that she's just connected to. And I think in a way our culture is ignoring that. It's kind of ignoring the reality of our psychological, emotional, and spiritual needs, and calling out to women to feel empowered, to feel liberated, and saying that this kind of sexual behavior will give them that sensation, whereas in reality it's doing the opposite. It's actually making women feel less empowered and less secure about themselves and their bodies.
There's as you were talking, I dug up this thing that I stumbled upon thinking about this topic. I want to show you something. This is pretty okay. I'll just show you, and then okay, so take a look at this. So what you're seeing here is essentially a visual, like a real life kind of demonstration of how a dating app works. And if you think about that, it's pretty crazy. Essentially, this is what's happening. So when you swipe to the left or to the right or whatever it is, however the dating app works, essentially that's what you're doing. And when you kind of zoom out on it from this kind of perspective, it really makes you think about what is happening here in terms of human culture, and taking a deep view on human nature here. We know we know from the wisdom of Kabbalah that the human egoism is the thing that drives our evolution. It's the thing that keeps growing. It's the thing that took us out of the caves and brought us to where we are today. It's the thing that develops us intellectually, emotionally, but it develops us in a very certain trajectory, and that trajectory is that it directs us to continuously minimize our commitment to others, because we get more, as the ego grows throughout history, individuals become more and more focused on themselves, on their own needs, their own desires, their self-centered, their whole perception becomes more and more self-centered, and so we want to minimize commitments. And now the fact that it's also happening in sex, that shows that we're undergoing some sort of an evolutionary process here, because sex is, the most basic, like you said in the beginning, the most basic connection between the sexes that doesn't just procreate life, enables the creation of the continuation of the human species, but it's also an indication of the dynamic between the sexes that make up humanity. And so the fact that something is not working in this area means that the growth of the ego has reached a certain peak. And so we can look at everything that's happening in human culture today as an adaptation mechanism. Human culture makes it easier for us today through these dating apps, through a more permissive mentality, through making it very customary for people to to not get to a serious relationship. Through all that, we're kind of adapting ourselves to the human egoism that's growing within us and bubbling and driving this kind of greater and greater gaps, lesser and lesser commitments. But we're also losing a certain dynamic interplay between the sexes that is supposed to happen. This whole idea of getting the opposite sex to like you, to be interested in you, to be to do something for the other one. All of that is kind of belongs to the past in today's world, doesn't it?
Yeah, because we're used to, like you said, very, very direct communication patterns that get straight to the point. They're very, I would say, egoistic, as you said. I read a story, and it was chilling, of this college student who said that she was up with a guy and feeling very insecure about herself the whole time. And after a while, they stopped hooking up, and then later they became friends. Once they were friends and the guy got to know her, he said to her, and during the time that we were hooking up, I actually didn't even see you as a human being. And to hear that, to understand that there is something very, very wrong about what's going on, and it has to do, I think, with a lack of education, because we have sexual education in schools, which is basically teaching kids to be safe when having sex, but it's not teaching them what you were talking about, how to actually connect, form a relationship, to know, to read the emotional signs, to care, to understand the differences between men and women, and know how to make the correct kind of bond between them.
That's another
and there's
thing.
Something but go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. But that's the differences between. This is a topic that it's a problem to get into without being controversial, because today, there is basically the differences between men and women, and the blurring of differences between the sexes is what I'm talking about. This is a topic that the moment you talk about it, you're either considered like very against one group of people or very much in favor of one group of people. But this is something I'd like to get into from a zooming out and from a global perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, to understand what's happening in that respect. If we look at the consequences of such a process. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I'd really be interested in hearing that. I just wanted to show something to kind of make this point even clearer. This is a research, I just sent it to you right now, that shows what people actually feel about long-term relationships with people who have been promiscuous, who have had casual relationships. And there's a graph right in the middle of that article that shows that most men, 80% of men and 62% of women, chose the never promiscuous target as their ideal partner. See, 80% of men prefer to commit to a woman or to be in a relationship with a woman who has never been promiscuous. And 62% of women also prefer that. So, see, someone with a limited sexual history and little interest in casual sex, past or present. So this is interesting because it shows that despite a certain culture that's developed, a certain mentality that's developed, that casual sex is the norm, we see that the truth is that people would rather be with others who have not been promiscuous in that way. And it shows something, I think, about our deeper natures, about what we really seek in relationship. And I think that's what we need to look at. Where is our culture and the norms that we've developed? Where are they actually in opposition to what's natural for us, to what we really need, to what we really seek and want, and are not able to admit it?
And the facts show that we're not having more sex, we're having less. That's what's mind-boggling about this whole thing. That while the culture,
and for women,
Go ahead.
Women prefer to have sex. Women prefer to have sex within a relationship. It's much better for them. It fulfills their needs in a much healthier and greater way. Without trust, without emotional connection, women just don't enjoy sex that much. This is what the studies are showing.
Okay, I wanna take this to a kind of a tangent, but sail with me for a moment. So, and by
Okay.
the way, I'm seeing that yeah, we do have some live viewers that are with us, and yeah, and you guys, if you have any specific angles that you'd like us to discuss, questions. I see there is one question from Emmy Carpenter just posted. Maybe let's read it. How do we fulfill the needs of those who don't fit into binary identities, like someone whose identities as non-binary? Yeah, okay. So that fits into what I was going to get into. So okay, let's be honest. There's this whole movement of the gender neutrality movement, and the blurring of differences between male and female is a big topic today. There are millions of people who identify as non-binary today, and it's an issue. Now, let's try to put all the controversial nature of this discussion on the sidelines. Why? Because the moment you say you're in favor of something like that, you're considered you get lumped into a category of like an ultra liberal radical something. The moment you say you're against that, then you are a primitive, primitive caveman, not understanding the direction of the world. Okay, let's not talk about that at all. Let's talk about why is it happening. Let's try to understand what is it in the human race that is now playing out. What is that process of human evolution that creates this new concept in human beings to begin with? All right? So if you're watching us now in this podcast live and or not, just hold on for a second, okay? And don't go into the in favor and against kind of thinking. Let's think about the why. So we need to understand this. The mind of nature lies between male and female. And I'm not talking men and women even. I'm talking about the fundamental components that make up everything and anything in nature. And this could be electrons and protons, ebb and flow, certainly male and female in different species, heat and cold, and inhale, exhale, contraction, expansion. Everything in reality is built from these male and female components, foundations. And Kabbalah explains where it's coming from. It's coming from the nature of creation, of how the quality of the creator and the quality of the created being come into contact. And so this is what creates life. And these male and female components in nature, they continuously play, dance with each other, and find new ways to merge with each other in order to create the new level of life. And they appear in different forms each time, but they're always these two opposites. Now, what happens when we try to blur the differences? And Tal, maybe you can already think about what you can maybe add to this from a psychological perspective. But from the wisdom of Kabbalah's perspective, it's very clear that when we blur the differences between opposites, our perception is impaired. What's happening is that everything we perceive in life is actually a result of contrasts. Bitter and sweet, hot and cold, light and darkness. Contrasts are what builds our meaning in life and our cognition and perception and the way in which we decipher reality. There is absolutely no meaning for minus by itself or plus by itself, for cold by itself or hot by itself. It's only, and the same goes with everything, and our senses work that way as well. It's only through a resistance and a contradiction and a contrast that we can perceive anything at all. So when we blur the differences between the male and female parts of reality, of nature, what's happening is that beyond the sociological, cultural level, what's happening is that we are impairing the way in which we decipher reality. But why is this happening? That's where we started from. And this is the beauty of the wisdom of Kabbalah, that it explains human evolution in a very neutral kind of way. It simply explains the process. And the process is that we are simply developing towards a new level of connection between the male and female. Because just like these male and female components created all the stuff we know on the inanimate level, and then on the vegetative level, and then on the animate level, humans are now in the midst of an evolutionary crossroads where we are losing the old forms of connection between the male and female, and still haven't found the new, more advanced, higher level of evolution that will come from merging the male and female in a spiritual bond that we're not yet familiar with. And so if you look at it from that perspective, clearly both the decline in sex that we started from and the gender neutrality movement that Emmy, I think, brought up, thank you for bringing this up, all of this are parts of human evolution. This is an evolution of the human species that's taking place. And so it's not a matter of judging it in a way of, better or worse, or who's in favor of who's against. It's just a part of the natural process. I'm talking for quite a long time here. Tal, why don't you say what you think?
Well, I'd like to continue and say that part of this process that we're going through is what's happening is, I think we're seeing a kind of gradual detachment from our definition of self through our physical bodies, and people are growing less and less and strongly affiliated with their physical body as their definition of who they are.
Right.
And
right.
I think that has to do with that we're moving into greater spiritual awareness and spiritual connections and where we'll discover that each of us has the male and female component within them spiritually, and the spiritual bond between male and female is something that can happen basically in any relationship. And I think that is what's important, that we teach the skills of relationship and improve our connections, make them deeper, make them more satisfying, make them more whole. And the more we teach these skills of relationship to everyone, and sooner, and not wait till we've already been divorcing at the rate that we're divorcing, or experiencing this sex recession, but really heal society by teaching connection, by teaching how to love one another, then we will find the right connection. We will find this higher spiritual love, and I think we'll stop looking at our definitions in the same way. Mm-hmm. We will look at a higher level of connection, and that will be the most inclusive thing ever. I think right now we can't find inclusivity in our society because we need to find it on a higher level where everyone is truly equal, because we all can share love and share our connection in a way that is not attached to our physical self. I think that is where we're heading, and that's why there's so much confusion on this level right now, because it's pushing us to find a higher and deeper level of connection.
All right. I wanna take what you said, Tal, and read something for you and for our viewers. This is a quote, just a short quote from the Book of Zohar. This was in an article written by Kabbalist Dr. Michael Lightman about this whole appearance of the gender neutrality movement and what it means in regards to human evolution. And so let me just see, maybe that we can even, I don't know if it's big enough to read for our viewers, but I'll try. So this is from the Book of Zohar. The human is the inclusion of male and female, and the world cannot be built if male and female are not both present. And this just goes directly in line with what you were talking about. We are evolving towards a spiritual level of connection between the male and female, and this is something that needs to happen in mankind. We're the only ones who can do that. We're the only ones who are naturally designed to do that. The atoms do their part, the molecules do their part. They're connecting the male and female foundations of nature to a certain extent. Then it happens in plants and animals and all around us, and they're doing it by instinct. But with humans, we have to do it consciously. We have to, we are like the conscious part of nature coming into its harmonious state. And so it's only natural that towards a higher awareness, towards a higher consciousness, you have confusion and crisis and vagueness and misunderstanding and and not understanding each other and choosing sides and so forth. But really, again, from a broader perspective, what's happening here is that as a species, we are nature is playing through us and basically working its thing through us. Okay, I wanna just take a look at some of the comments here. There is a question from Anna. She's asking, what would a spiritual relationship be like? That's a great question. Great question. You want to throw in your 2 cents?
Sure. Well, I think a spiritual relationship would first of all be one in which both sides, both people, want to discover a spiritual connection between them and are willing to mutually work on that. And we call it a shared space that we want to build above our egos, above ourselves. Our ego is basically our desire to control the other person and to have our way. And if both people are willing to rise above all of these things, our judgments and our our petty behaviors, and are willing to step above that and create a kind of shared space of love between us, then it creates a spiritual bond, because we're rising above our egos and finding something that is shared. Also, we need to try and feel the other person's needs and desires and want to fulfill them, and be a kind of channel for them, a channel of love, a channel of light. And in that way, we kind of mutually fill each other and really make sure that each person is happy and growing in the direction that they want to grow and fulfilling their dreams. So really, a spiritual relationship is where we learn, like in a kind of laboratory, we learn about our own natures and how to build a real kind of love between us, that is a shared space between us.
Thank you.
Joseph, you want to
Yeah,
add something?
I will. I will just take it and build on that. And regarding what, in relation to what we've talked about before, the kind of development that we're moving towards is we are gradually elevating ourselves from physicality. And this is why physicality today gets confused and weird and strange. And as we've seen from the Atlantic, article that we started with, it's also declining. But the only reason is because we're losing balance on one level in order to rise to a higher balance, to a balance on a higher level. And this is what happens throughout evolution all the time. If you look at evolution biology, it's very evident that this is how higher levels of evolution are working. And so a spiritual relationship is one in which the two sides of the relationship will be able to discover that guiding force between them, that both the rejections between them, coming from the growth of the human ego between them, and their attempt to build a bridge, a connection of mutual concern. On top of that, they both become a living thing, and it's essentially the mind of nature is discovered between these in the coupling between the between the two parts of the relationship. And so essentially a spiritual relationship is one in which spirituality is revealed and is guiding the relationship. We can do, this is something that's probably worth its own talk. We should definitely we can definitely set the time and do something like that. Let's see. We're almost out of time for today. Yeah.
I have to say that this is something we need to learn and acquire the skills for. It's something you need to practice, preferably with other people who are also practicing it, to give you a kind of environment that will support you in this process. So this is the kind of education that we're talking about that is so necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For sure. We're kind of almost out of time here in terms of this podcast, but maybe we can kind of, I don't know if summarize, but maybe just put a few thoughts out there towards what's to come. Where are we going with this?
With the sexual recession?
Yeah, or human evolution, however you wanna look at it.
We're going to a place where we realize that the current way that our society is built and behaving is just not making us happy. It's making us anxious. It's making us depressed. It's making us detached from each other and having less sex and less connection in general. And we're seeing this in all the statistics, and they're pretty bad statistics when it comes to anxiety, depression, even drug abuse and so on. So I hope that sooner rather than later we'll realize that something needs to change, that we really need to work on these communication and relationship, emotional skills that are lacking right now, and bring back the warmth and networking abilities of human beings, and really create a society that works. We threw away a lot of the traditions that we had and opted for a more liberal society, but in the process we lost a lot of the natural healthy wisdom that came with those traditions. And we don't need to go back, but we do need to take those cues from nature about what really makes us happy, what's really healthy for us, and what it is that our next step in development actually is which is what we talked about, greater connection, deeper connection, which will really make us happy and healthy.
All right, I'll add a few thoughts to conclude on myself as well. But before that, we will have the last few minutes dedicated to a blitz of quickly answering whatever questions you guys throw into the chat. So this is the time to, if you have any kind of questions that you feel are related to the topic, just don't hold yourself. Just throw them quickly into the chat, and we will try to quickly answer them in a blitz. So a few concluding thoughts. I think that it's important for everyone to be educated about human evolution, about our spiritual evolution. Essentially, what we're going towards is a spiritual transformation, but it needs to be driven by education. And that is because we're kind of in a race between chaos and suffering and anxiety, like you said, and other ailments, social ailments, that and conscious development. The sooner we begin to realize what is happening to us as a human society, the sooner we begin to understand that nature has in store for us something. Our development is taking us somewhere, and we need to understand where it's taking us and then see how we can move there more smoothly and with less pain and live a better life towards there. And where it's taking us is to a higher level of connection in every sense of the word. This is why we're seeing many other ailments in society as well. The family unit in general is something that is gradually, from many perspectives, is disintegrating today. This has a lot to do with the decline in sex, obviously, but this is also something we can discuss separately in a separate conversation. But what it's showing us is that the fabric of human society, this is why I mentioned the family unit is the most basic building block of it. The fabric of human society needs to undergo an upgrade. It needs a new basis in order to hold itself. If we understand that nature is now taking us through this development of a new spiritual infrastructure that will take us to a higher, more evolved level of perception on everything that's happening, then we will live in a different way. We will experience even what's happening to us on a personal level in a completely different way. We'll be connected to these guiding forces of nature and begin to see them through what is happening. And that's a whole different level of experience. All right, so Tal, let's look if there's any questions and take like 3 minutes to answer all of them before we say goodbye for today. So okay, I see this. Do we need sex in general if spiritual pleasures can be so much satisfying? Okay, this is from Rachel. So you want to start? I'll start, but we need to be quick.
I'll say one line.
Okay.
That
I'll continue from wherever you stop.
That I really like this about Kabbalah, that it connects the spiritual world with our physical world. And so even the more we'll call them basic needs become spiritual, and that we learn how to connect even the sexual act with, we can potentially make it a very high spiritual act, and we need to learn how to do that. And then it enhances even the most corporeal pleasures and makes them much more deep and significant.
As long as I'm adding, as long as we live in this world with our bodies, sex is typically, the physical sexual activity is typically something we need for our survival as well. But if our head is up in the sky, and if we're constantly aiming ourselves towards higher and higher pleasures, then everything that we do here, becomes only an excuse, like a reason to just, we have to live in this world, you have to feed the body, you have to do all kinds of things. But there is a much greater kind of union that we're aiming towards, and that is with the higher force of nature itself. So let's reach the higher level of coupling. Is spiritual, Mariana, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is spiritual evolution developing without male and female components? I'll quickly say it, I'll add if you want. No, because male and female, we only see this as men and women because that's what we're used to. But everything that exists in reality comes from two forces in nature. There's only two forces in reality. The quality of the creator, referred to as male in Kabbalah, this is a matter of language, and the quality of the created being, referred to as a vessel or a will to receive, or female. And these are not men and women. These are the foundations of reality. The desire to bestow and the desire to receive, also called male and female. So everything that happens and evolves in reality, from the very still degree all the way to the high degrees of spiritual evolution, it's all happening between these two components. It's about connection between these two components. You want to add, Tal?
Yeah, and if you look at Kabbalistic books and teachings, you'll see that they're full of relationships and sexual descriptions of this connection between the male and female forces, but they're not talking about corporeal men and women. They're always talking about the spiritual process, where, as Joseph was saying, the plus and the minus, the female and the male, connect in all these ways. And this is something that we need to discover in our spiritual search. And this is something that women do and men do. And it has nothing to do with our physical bodies, but it is necessary for spiritual attainment.
All right. We have a last question, and that is Megapetichon. I hope I am pronouncing that username correctly. When will be the next podcast? It will be next week. We are not sure about the day yet. We will know, and we will this time send an email somehow to all of you, or do a schedule thing on YouTube. We'll figure it out. But next week you can expect the next one. I hope I didn't miss other questions there in the stream. We need to conclude, and thank you, Tal, for this wonderful conversation, and thank you everyone for being with us. This was KabNET Live, and we will see you next time. All the best until then. Bye bye.